how you want to say it. And
I'll give a brief intro, and then Jack will do an official intro for the next session. Our speaker and tire today is Kevin Hutchison. Kevin drove up from Austin, and thank you very much. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, Steve. All right, well, thanks for inviting me, number one, and thanks for being patient while I got to the correct building, number two. I'm kind of a meat and potatoes fly tire. I don't tie anything that takes longer than 5 minutes because my customers can stick it in a tree in 2 minutes, and that's kind of bad math. So not that that would ever happen, and not that my customers would ever stick them in a tree. But I pretty much tie guide flies. I tie flies that are durable, flies that catch fish.
I think we need the light on for the time.
Whoa, there we go. So nothing you see today is going to be one of those like, oh my God, I got to go home and immediately do this moments. But the flies that I tie, like I said, they're durable, they catch fish, and that's really my end goal as a guide, is to have my box full of flies that are going to work. Unfortunately, my entire life revolves around something that has a brain the size of a pea showing up for the dance. And if they show up, great. And if they don't, then I have a really long day making up humorous stories. So first fly I'm going to tie is a foxy clowser. And I'm going to tie a clowser probably a little different than some of you may have seen, although I know Russell Hustad has probably shown you guys how to do this. It's a bend back clowser. And I also tie rubber legs on my clousers, which I don't know of anybody else that does that, but rubber legs, bass love rubber legs, period. It's just a truism. So I try to slam rubber legs on pretty much anything. I don't know how many of you guys know Matt Bennett. Matt Bennett's got a great concept that he takes somebody else's fly design, he puts rubber legs on it, changes the name, and calls it his own. So that's kind of my theory also. I love Matt to death, but he's pretty open about it. If any of you have ever seen the Rio Getter, and then the next fly I'm going to tie is a swamp monster, you're going to notice a very uncanny resemblance. So I'll just leave it at that. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to bend my hook a little bit. And as you can see, I'll turn it in the profile here. I've bent it about, I don't know how many degrees, but just a slight bend to it. And this is going to give it a bend back profile when we're finished, and it'll make a little bit more sense when we're finished. This fly is great if you have accuracy problems and like to stick them up in trees, because this will fall right out of a tree. It'll walk right over a log. It's an amazing weedless type fly. So I tie a lot of these because I never quite know what I'm going to get as far as casting ability. One thing that you can, if you guys ever fish with guides, one golden rule is never, ever, ever tell a guide that you're an expert fly caster, because he will not sleep until the day of your trip because he knows that you're terrible. Because expert fly casters do not say they're expert fly casters. So just a general rule, if you want to get along with your guide, please don't say that. Okay, so I'm going to put a little thread base down right into the bend here. Not too deep, just a little tiny thread base, and that's just going to provide a little bit of a grip for my eyes. Now I tie eyes on a little bit different than most people do. If I could do one thing in my life, I would go through every fly tying book, and the part where they show you how to do the figure eight, I would tear that part out, because that's going to make you a much better fly tyer. That is a sure recipe for loose eyes. So here's how I do it, and it's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to try and do it unhanded. So I'm going to hold one pupil of the eye, and I'm going to go in one direction 15 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to move my hand. I normally wouldn't, so you can see what I'm doing. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And it kind of is important that you count. Now I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to twist the eyes straight.
Guys, I'm gonna. Someone's got background noise, so I'm gonna mute everybody.
Having another meeting. But you can see on the top profile here, it's crooked. the eyes are distinctly crooked because I've been torquing them all in one direction. Now, if I take my fingers and I straighten them out, what I've created is a bunch of tension in that thread, and that's what I want. So I'm going to straighten that out, and then I'm going to go the opposite direction 15 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, if I did it right, they're straight. And luckily, I did it right. Now, how many of you remember when you used to actually sew buttons on shirts that lost buttons before you just threw the shirt away and went and bought a cheap shirt? Okay, when your mom or when you finished sewing a button on, what did you do? You frapped it, exactly. I was an Eagle Scout, and in pioneering, that's exactly the word you use. You frap it. So at this point, the thread is like a little triangle, and what we're going to do is we're going to cinch that triangle together. And how we're going to do that is we're going to go around the base of the thread. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to slowly pull it. Then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and slowly pull it. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and slowly pull it and tie it off. I guarantee you those eyes are tighter than any eyes tied on with a figure 8. Now, I would love to say that I invented this, but I didn't. There's a fly tyer that's real famous up north where I used to live. His name is Royce Dahm, and he actually invented the mouse rat fly. And he showed me how to do that, and I mean, it totally changed my world. These eyes will not move. And if you put a little bit of super glue on them, they definitely aren't going anywhere. So that's how I get the eyes on. Now, on this bend back clowser, you know how on a normal clowser you tie some on the bottom and then you tie some on the top, you invert it and all that stuff. This one's great because you don't have to tie anything on the other side. Everything goes on the bottom side of the hook, which is now the top side of the fly. So I turn it upside down. For those of you that have rotary vices, just rotate it. This vice is rotary, but I learned how to tie on a non-rotary. And I'm a dog you can't teach a new trick to, apparently. So now I'm going to take a foxtail, and this is just a tail that I bought. I actually bought it at a boutique, and had a little clip on it. It was made to clip on a purse. And I walked in and I saw it, and the woman had it priced ridiculously low. And I said, "How many of those do you have?" And she said, "I don't know, maybe 8 or 10. And I said, "I'll take them all." And so I bought them all because she had no idea what they were worth. So I'm going to take a pretty good sized hunk of fox here, and I'm going to show you why I'm going to take so much of this. I'm going to clip it off as close as I can to the hide. Now, on this particular bunch, this is the first bunch, I don't really want all that under fur. So I'm going to take my scissors, you can use a bone comb or whatever, and I'm going to comb out most of that under fur. Just kind of comb it out. I want to really get this down to a slimmer stack. So you can see I've taken away about 25% of the volume. I'm going to grab it at the tips. I'm going to comb it out even more, and I'm going to end up with about 50% of the volume that I started with. Okay, so now I have a nice clump. I've maintained the tips. I'm going to go ahead and hold it on here. Bob Clowser, always when he ties his, they're 2.5 times the hook shank length. I can't really afford to do that because a lot of my customers are not real hip on detecting strikes, and they get a lot of short strikes. So I go about 1.5 times the hook shank length. And I tie that in. I tie it all up front. I'll come in and I'll preen out the bad stuff. And you see I've got a little knot up there. I'm going to come in with my scissors at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to clip it. And now I've created, if you can see real clearly, I've created a little ramp. And what that does is that allows me to tie my thread down without it just falling off the cliff. Now, is that important to the fish? No. Is it important to your buddies that you're giving this fly to that head's nice and tapered? Of course it is. Because they're all going to laugh at you behind your back that you tie clunky heads. Okay, we've got our base layer down. Now we're going to use 2 kinds of flash. And there are 2 very distinct types of flash that fly tyers use. There is Flashabou, and there is Crystal Flash. Crystal Flash, Flashabou. Which one's stiffer? Obviously, Crystal Flash. So we're going to use the Crystal Flash to support the Flashabou here. So we're going to take 4 strands of Crystal Flash. By the way, anybody know where Crystal Flash came from?
From Flashabou that's twisted?
Nope. Crystal Flash came from Barbie hair. They made a Barbie like in the 70s. It was, I guess she was like Streetwalker Barbie or something, but she had some kind of crazy hair. And a fly tyer saw it and just cut all the hair off of it. And the company that makes it saw a market, and they started marketing it, and it's basically Barbie hair. So we're going to take 4 strands of that, and you didn't see what I did, and that's important, so let me start over. I'm going to take 4 strands of this. I'm going to cut it right up next to the wire tie. If you really want to see me get angry, cut Crystal Flash short when I'm doing a seminar, and you will hear about it. I have this. I'm going to grasp it somewhat in the middle, like this. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to fold it around the thread. This does 2 things. Number 1, the fish can now not pull it out because it's doubled over the thread. Number 2, I can slide it right into place and hold it. If you've ever had trouble controlling Crystal Flash, there's your answer. It's right up on top. I knock it down with a couple of thread wraps. I'm going to leave it long. I'm not worried about it being long. I'll come back and cut that. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the Flashaboo. I'm going to take 5 or 6 strands of that. And this stuff's a little wild, so sometimes you get a little bit more than you want. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to double it over the thread and hold it. And I'm going to slide it right into place and put down about 3 or 4 wraps, maybe 5 or 6. Hold it in place. Now, because the Crystal Flash is underneath it, it'll support that Flashaboo and not just let it drape all over the place. Okay? So that's kind of good. Now, at this point, I am going to trim it because now I'm going to put some more fox over it. It's going to get a little more complicated. Do not come in and do the Dutch boy haircut because nothing in nature looks like that. So you're going to come in and you're going to slide your scissors as you cut. When the barber or the hairstylist is cutting your hair, never do those scissors stay in one position. They're always moving. They're always sliding. And what that does is it gives you a nice tapered cut just like that. Uneven ends, very natural looking. Last step, simple. We're going to go back to the fox and we're going to take about half of what we took on the first clump. I love clousers because they're very mathematical. It's all math with this. It's all proportions and percentages. And I'm going to cut that off the hide, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to comb out all that underfur that we don't want. The reason we don't really want underfur on this, even though it sinks, is because this hair inherently will absorb water. And at some point, it gets to be too much. We don't want to have it absorbing too much water. Now, the length is going to be easy because the length is already set. We know what the length is. It's already got a base layer. Cody knows I have a face for radio, so he's just plugging it in. Okay, I'm going to lay this right on top, and you see that I'm making it even. I'm going to switch hands. I'm going to come over the top. I'm going to put my positioning wrap. What's it going to do? It's always going to torque away from me. So I'm going to put about 3 or 4 wraps, and I'm going to let it torque. Then I'm going to take my fingers, and I'm going to torque it back. Now I've got it where I want it. I come in again at my 45-degree angle. Boom. And now I begin to form the head. Just a real simple wrap down at this point. And it just depends on how good you want to make it look. I mean, at this point it's done. I want to make this one look a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a few more thread wraps on it. Just to nail that down a little bit. And now we've got a nice clouser. This looks like it has a ton of mass. When this thing gets wet, it will slim down to almost nothing. Fox or coyote is a good substitute. If you don't have access to foxtails, coyote tails work perfectly well. And now I'm going to go ahead and put a whip finish on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know this one's going to bang on the bottom, so it gets 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 whip finishes, then we're done. Clip it off, take it out of the vise. We're going to hold it like a deck of cards. If there's any strands that are a little bit long, we're just going to come in and individually cut them, and that's it. Put it back in the vise so you can see it. Foxy clouser. My wife will not step into the boat unless there's at least 6 of these in my box, because this is her go-to fly. This fly is great. It imitates nothing really, but it looks like a bunch of things. It has the color of a crayfish. It has the movement of a crayfish. When you do hard strips on it, it kind of undulates and jerks a little bit. It's a great little fly, super easy to do. But look at the difference in the profile because of that bend back. It is so much easier to walk that thing over logs and to walk it out of a tree and to do a lot of things with it. That bend back makes all the difference in the world. I have not, since Russell showed me how to tie clousers like that, I have not done it the same way. Now, let me talk about rubber legs. I didn't put them in here. Let me show you, if I was going to put them in, I'll show you when I would have done that. It was after I got the second bunch on, I would have come back.
Second bunch of...
The second bunch of fox. I would have come back behind the eyes, and that's the only time I'm going to come back behind the eyes. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take some of these, and these are jig skirts. All I do is I buy jig skirts and I cut them apart, which says a lot about my social life, that I have time to do that. Pretty sad.
What size bed is that?
It's a 140. I tie 90% of my bass flies with 140. I'm going to take 3 rubber legs. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to double them around the thread, again, so that they don't get pulled out. I'm going to snug them right up in there. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. 3 shots only. Take 3 more. And believe me, fish don't count. So if you get one that's got 4 and one that's got 3, really, it isn't going to matter. I'll tell you a little story. The guy who taught me how to tie flies, his name is Dick Powell. He's 103, still alive. And he taught me when he was about 70, so he was pretty much a spring chicken at the time. And Dick taught me 2 things. He used to watch me tie, and he would just laugh and laugh. And he'd say, boy, either you control the materials or the materials control you. And so that's when you learn to really control stuff. And then the other thing, one time I asked him, I said, Dick, what color should I make this? And he said, you can make it any color you want, as long as it's chartreuse. Those are the 2 things I always remember about Dick. But I went back to, he's in Indiana, I went back to Indiana for his 100th birthday, and he's still a salty old cuss. Anyway, so you just tie legs on it. Pretty simple, pretty easy. You can tie legs on it. If that's heresy for you, you don't have to tie legs on it. No big deal.
Hey Kevin, I've never used fox. How does foxtail compare to traditional bucktail?
It's way more supple. Bucktail is a tube. It is it's just like deer hair is a tube. Deer hair is like bamboo. Deer hair is hollow and it has individual chambers. Bucktail is a tube, but it's a solid tube. It's full. It doesn't have the air chambers in it. That's why bucktail doesn't float, because it is a solid material. It's much stiffer. It doesn't have anywhere near the action, and it will not absorb water. It can't, because it's solid. It's a solid piece. So for bucktail, it's going to be a little more tender. This stuff is going to be a little tougher than bucktail is, but bucktail is about 1/8 of the price. You buy a good bucktail, you can tie 1,000 clousers out of it. And I've got some bucktail here. Well, I thought I did. No, I guess I didn't bring it. Anyway. With?
Shelby Hanson's or you big one?
No. You know what? These aren't going to last that long. I would love to think that I'm gonna have these in my box for 3 weeks and we're going to fish them 6 times. These are one-use flies. They're going to get used. They're going to get destroyed either by a fish or something else. And I don't put head cement on anything anymore. It just doesn't. It doesn't pay. It's too long. I got to let them dry and screw around with all that. So yeah, no. That's just that may be a pot liquor answer, but they're not going to last that long. And again, I'm not dogging on anybody. I really encourage, and anybody that's fished with me knows, I encourage people to throw in the most ridiculous places humanly possible. You throw in there and you think, if I hook a fish, how am I going to get that fish out? You know what? Figure it out when you hook the fish. Okay? That's a really, really good problem to have. And I say this all the time in my boat. There's an equivalent of the Green Berets in the English Army, and they're called the SAS, the Special Air Services. And when I worked for Department of Defense, I used to work for the SAS all the time. I used to train some of their guys. And they have a motto, and their motto is, who dares wins. And I believe that in the boat. When I throw a fly, if I have to throw it behind a log, underneath a branch, around a lily pad, I'm going to do it, because there may be a fish there. And if I hook them, maybe I get them out, maybe I don't. But if I don't hook them, I never know. So take the risk the fly. Flies are cheap. You saw, I mean, if I wasn't talking, I can tie that fly in 2.5 minutes. And I can tie a lot of flies in an hour if they only take 2.5 minutes. So that's my theory.
So how do you bend your hooks back? Is there a particular hook
You can use if you use a pair of pliers, grind down the teeth on them, because the teeth will kind of ruin them a little bit. You will lose about 20% of the hooks you try to bend because they're brittle. They'll break. So the easiest way to do it is to use your vise, and I'll show you exactly how I do it. I put them in the vise, and this is a Dynaking, so it has a hook pocket, which you can kind of see it there. It has a little pocket that the hook goes in. I'm going to put it in that hook pocket, which is just about where I want to bend it anyway, and then I just simply hold it and gently bend it back.
Okay.
Okay, it's real simple, but you've got to know that you're going to lose some. That's just part of the game. That's part of bending them. You can buy bend back hooks and pay a whole lot of money for them, and you can do it yourself. So just as easy.
What size is that?
It's a 2. I tie a lot of my bass flies on 2s and 4s, sometimes 6s. I'm going to do a 6. I'm going to do a 4. The next one I'm going to do is on this exact same hook. So just because it's easy to transfer. Any questions about this one? You guys want me to do another one, or you want to see this again, or what do you want to do?
Well, I like
Do another one?
it.
All right. Let's do another one. This one's called the Bass Candy. The guy who invented this, his name is John Luke. And John Luke used to be the photo editor of Southwest Fly Fishing. And I always had this, foolish mental image of myself of being a really good bass fisherman with a fly rod until I fished with him. And then I just felt like an idiot. Because I saw this guy do things that I had never seen anyone do with a fly rod and a bass. He is amazing. And he invented this fly, and it's a really great pattern the way he ties it, but it takes 20 minutes. So mine is the stripped down Walmart version. It's kind of like, I used to work with a guy, and he said, you're like Japan. You get something in your head, and you figure out how to make it faster and cheaper and easier. And it was an insult, but I kind of took it as a compliment, because I do like to strip flies down from complicated to simple. So this one's called a Bass Candy. It's another streamer fly, and it's a real simple tie. Again, you'll see how simple this is. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our thread in. We're going to use that 140 thread again, and we're going to tie down about halfway, and then come up to the eye, and then come back to about a quarter. So we're about 3/4 of the way up from the back. Trim off our tag, and we're going to do the same thing with our eyes this time. We're going to tie them in. Whoops, got all kinds of crystal flash going here. We're going to tie them in just like we did before. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Twist them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. They're pretty straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull. And then knock it off. Now let me talk a little bit about when I'm pulling on thread. How many of you get really frustrated when you pull really tight on thread and it breaks? Okay. I can show you about 90% of why that's happening. This thread is amazingly strong when I pull on it very slowly. It takes a lot to break it. When I pull on it and give it a little kinetic energy, it breaks right away. It does not like being pulled quickly. So don't get in a hurry. When I do fly tying seminars, I see guys and they just want to, I call it bouncing. They want to bounce that thread. It doesn't like that. Slowly pull it. Same thing with monofilament. Monofilament, you can pull 8-pound test. I've got a trigger pull gauge for one of my guns. I can pull 8-pound test filament to 24 pounds if I pull it slowly. If I jerk on it, it gets about 9 pounds of breaks. So pull slowly. Slow and easy wins the race here. Okay, so we're going to tie all the way to the back here. We got our eyes on. We're going to start to form our body. We're going to use some of this stuff. It has about 1 million names. It's cactus chenille, ultra chenille, trilobal, all kinds of names. Whatever you find that works, that's what you're going to use. So I got a little out of sequence. We're going to cut a piece of this off, but before I do that, I got ahead of myself. We're going to take about 5 strands of the crystal flash, a little bit more than we did on the clowser. We're going to cut that, and we're going to tie that in as a little tail. So we're going to go back behind the eyes. Sorry, I got a little out of sequence there. And we're going to even it up in our hand, and then we're just going to tie it down. And that's just going to give us a little sparkly tail. It's about 10 strands, so it's not overly obnoxious. Okay, and again, we're going to leave it long. We'll trim it out in a minute. Now, the best way to tie this stuff in is to go in and with your fingers strip away to what are called the master threads. You can see those 2 little threads. Tie that in. That's not slippery. If you try to tie in the other stuff, you'll start pulling on it and boom, it comes loose. So tie in the master threads. We're going to tie those down, tie them up a little bit, and then we're going to tie right up in front of the eyes. Now we're going to take this, and again, if you've got a rotating vise, you can spin it. I just kind of learned how to use both hands. And by the way, I am hopelessly left-handed, but I tie like a right-hander because when Dick was teaching me, he said, boy, you can't learn left-handed. None of the books are written for you, nothing's written for you. You got to learn how to do it the right way. So I learned to tie right-handed. Okay, yeah. You can only imagine what it was like. And Dick, by the way, everybody was always like, oh, you know, what kind of vise do you use? Dick used a pair of vice grips that was welded onto a train spike that was driven into a log. And he tied flies with that forever. And everybody had their Renzettis, and he just laughed. Okay, so we've got a little base going. All right? Now we're going to just gently put our thread right back behind the head and hide it in that ultra flash or whatever we're calling it. And we're going to take some legs. And again, these are just jig skirts that I tear apart. And this time we're going to take about 4 or 5 of them, a little bit more than we did on the clowser. And we're going to take them again, double them over the thread. I double everything over the thread. It just makes it so much more durable. The fish can't pull it out and it doesn't break. And we're going to put them right on the side and just tie them down so they stay right in position. And we're going to go back, take an equal amount for the other side. Fold them over the thread. Even them up a little bit. This guy's a little lopsided. I got a little bit more on that side, but that's okay. So we've got the legs on. We're almost done with this fly. This fly is almost finished. Okay, we're going to take some rabbit strips, and I love, this is my all-time favorite bass candy color. This is called Fire Tiger, and it's a banded rabbit strip. It's a little expensive, but you will learn how not to waste it because it's expensive and you don't want to waste too much of it. So, I'm going to transfer my thread back up to the front. I'm going to flip my fly, put it back in the vise for the measuring part, and then we're going to take it out again here in a second. I'm going to kind of eye it up. I'm going to penetrate the back of that hide with the hook. Boom, just like that. I'm going to take it out of the vise, pull it down into the hook bend, put it back. I've already got my thread in the proper spot. I let it overhang just a little bit like that. So now I can go in with my scissors and create a little bald spot. Hold it. And I'm going to put my positioning wrap on it. And what's it going to do? It's going to torque to the back. I'm okay with that. I know it's going to do it. I'm just going to let it go. Torque it to the back. Put a few position wraps on it. Make sure I got it. I'm going to come in here with my scissor tips. Cut as close as I can. And then again, I'm going to come in here and put on those wraps for my buddies that the fish don't care about, but you do. And just form a little head, maybe 20, 30 wraps to get it. Then I'm going to go back to my whip finisher, which is buried somewhere in here. And by the way, for those of you that tie flies and look at me using a whip finisher and I'm like, you could do that by hand. You could ride a horse to work too, okay? There's no reason not to use a tool that does it 10 times better. I've seen aces do it with their hands. I can do it with my hands. This tool is way better. So there's no machismo in doing that. I always laugh at guys that think that there's some unholy skill in doing that. And again, a good double whip finish. Bring it down. Now I've got it, it's a little bit long, so I'm going to come in here, and this is what's going to set me up for my next one. I'm going to slide underneath the skin, underneath the fur, and I'm going to cut it at a little bit of a taper just so it looks a little nicer in the water. Like that, and I'm going to set that aside for the next one, and that's a bass candy.
We can't see what you did there.
Which one, on the cut?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll hold up a piece and show you. It'll be easier to try and do it on the fly. So here I'm going to take it and I'm going to clip it this way, and I'm going to clip it that way. So it looks like a little picket. When I'm done with it, it'll look like a little picket, like a little picket fence. And all that does is on here, it leaves a nice little taper. Can you see that? Leaves a nice little taper to it. And if it's not enough taper for you, you can come in and taper a little bit more, just like that. And that gives it a little bit more action in the water. This is another jig type fly that you let sink, fish it on a floating line. You let it sink. When you strip it, it comes up, falls down, comes up, falls down. How many of you guys conventional tackle fish before you came to fly fishing? How many bass did you catch on the fall fishing a worm? About a jillion? Yeah, that's a pretty good number. These guys will hit this thing on the drop. So you jerk it up, you let it come up just like a rubber worm, and then you let it fall, and they'll take it on the fall. Almost every time. And again, how long did it take me to tie this fly? Complete with explaining it. Not long. These are quick, easy guide flies. I have never had one of these things fall apart. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've had ones fall apart after they caught like 15 fish. I made a whole bunch of these and sent them to a guy in South Africa, and he sent me this email that I had to read it like 3 times to realize that he was just pulling my leg. He fished for tigerfish with them, and he caught 1 tigerfish per fly, and he's like, "Yo, these flies are crap. They fall apart." And then I realized what, he along with that, he ordered another 3 dozen of them. Because if you've ever seen a tigerfish, they're pretty much teeth from head to tail. They're just nasty.
Can you put that back in the vice?
Yes, ma'am.
We got a request from our...
Yes.
Picture, thanks.
There we go.
Turn it.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So again, these are just real simple flies. Most of the flies that I tie that sink, that are subsurface flies, I tie them to fish on floating lines, because a lot of guys have trouble throwing sinking lines. Now there are some exceptions. There are, white bass fishing, you got to throw a sinking line. That's it. But a lot of the rivers I fish, like the San Marcos or the Colorado, they're only 4 or 5 feet deep at the places where I'm fishing them. So this can sink 2 or 3 feet. You're already halfway there on a floating line. So as long as you manage your leaders correctly, lengthwise and diameter-wise, you're still going to catch fish and not have to throw a sinking line, because that's hard. It's hard to do. I'm not in the hard business. I always tell people, I don't sell eggs, bread, or milk. You need nothing I do. I'm a total luxury business. And if I make it hard on you, you're not coming back. So throwing a floating line that you're used to throwing, managing, learning how to throw bigger flies, that's easy. Floating or sinking line is not so easy.
How long a leader do you use on that fly?
It depends on the river I'm fishing. If I'm fishing the San Marcos, which is a narrow river that may be 20 feet wide most of the time, or maybe 30 feet wide, I'm going to use a 7.5 foot leader, because I want to be able to get some line out of the tip to get a good cast going. If I'm fishing a Colorado that's 80 feet, 90 feet wide, I'm going to go to a 9 foot. I want to have enough leader to be able to get it down. And part of that's going to be your casting ability. The less ability you have, the shorter you're going to notice that leader get. Because a longer leader for some guys is harder to manage. And shorter leaders a lot easier. So anywhere between 7.5 to 9. I order leaders at the beginning of the season every year. I order about 600 7.5 foot leaders and about 300 9 foots, and I start from there.
What tip size?
10 to 12, 2x, 1x, 0x. These fish aren't leader shy. I always tell people that bass fishing is like, if you compare it to trout fishing is like ballet. bass fishing is like a knife fight in an alley. It's not about finesse. It's not about delicate presentation. It is about fighting a fish, turning them, and controlling them. When you hook a trout, what does he do? He runs right out in the current. He wants to fight you in the current. You hook a bass, he runs right back under the log, right around the tree. I got in the water 2 weeks ago to get a fish out from under a log. Guy hit a nice fish. It was 4.5-pound fish. Drove him under a log, and we could not get him out. I changed that boat position, and finally I'm just like, screw this. I just jumped out of the boat, reached down underneath it, and grabbed him. Because he was wrapped up so tight, we were never getting him out of there. You know, that's where he's going to go. You know, you've got to go and control these fish. So I never cheap out on tippet size. And you'll see it. When we start running the pictures on my presentation, you will laugh. People are like, oh my God. But they're not leader shy.
Kevin, either for the sig tip or for the floating line, do you ever use a shooting head?
You can if you need to get distance, but I'll be honest with you, you know, the distance isn't usually a problem. A lot of times, Julia will tell you, I mean, she's fished with me a bunch of times, and Cody, a lot of times you're 15 feet away from where you're going. The short game is harder. So you put a shooting head in the middle of that, you got more issues. You know, when you're making a cast that's effectively 20 feet, you've got a 9-foot leader, you've only got a little bit of line outside of there. So you don't really want to mess with that. What I do to my fly lines is, if you look on the box when you buy a fly line, there's a little profile on the back of the box, and it's usually got like 2 feet of running line, and then I cut that running line off immediately. I go right into the head. So if there's a shooting head on it, there's a gradual taper that goes to a fat taper, I'm right into that fat taper right away. That way I can get a little bit more punch out of a shorter cast. Because short casts are hard. When you have no weight, when you have no mass outside the tip, it's tough to do. So I'll modify fly lines if I have a guy who I'm never would I do that to a customer's line. Take his $90 line and hack off 2 feet of it while he has a stroke in the back of the boat. So what I'll do with him is I'll just modify the leader to shorten it up so that at some point he's got to pull that out to where it works. But yeah, that's a big no-no. Although there have been some guys I've wanted to do it just because they've been that frustrating. But anyway. All right, any questions about the bass candy? If not, we'll move on to probably my most requested fly, which is the swamp monster. And again, this is a fly that is easy to tie. This was a fly that somebody else invented the original version of it. Scott Sanchez, most of you probably don't know him, but he used to work at the Austin Angler eons ago, and he lives out in Montana or Wyoming now. And I reinvented this fly, and I felt really guilty because all these magazines were asking me to write stories about it, and I didn't know how to say, you know, I didn't really invent this. So I called Scott and I said, what are we going to do here? And he said, well, if you buy me a beer, you can call it yours. So I bought him a beer, and it's mine. So I don't feel guilty anymore about calling it my fly, but it is substantially different than what Scott tied. And this fly is a little bit more complicated. It's got a couple more steps to it, but again, it's real basic materials. It's basically 4-strand floss, chartreuse, and chartreuse thread, and rabbit hair. Voila. And a little bit of mohair yarn. This stuff has a little bit of flash in it, so I'm not going to use that. I don't really like it. Just a little bit of mohair yarn. And this is the hardest part of anything of this whole fly to find is chartreuse bead chain eyes are really difficult to find. And I've tried painting them, and it's really just a super time-consuming mess. So Hairline Dubbing sells them. And when I buy them, I usually buy about, 144 packs of them. Because I put them in my fly tying kits. I go through a lot of these.
Allen Fly Fishing.
Oh, do they have them? Okay, cool. Yeah, they're probably from Hairline. Because Hairline's the only place that I know. Wapsie doesn't make them, which is amazing because they make everything else. Okay, so let me switch my thread here. And normally I tie this with UTC 140, but I actually didn't have any. So I'm using kind of almost like a floss if I can get this through my bobbin, which I may not be able to. Yeah, I'm going to switch out. try this stuff.
You can also check True Value Hardware Store. They're starting to carry the colors now.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good to know. Although,
I get the rainbow ones.
Oh,
the
cool.
light pale blue. I get them there.
I don't know if I want to go in the Truva hardware store in Smithville because they're pretty grumpy in there. They True Value, apparently when COVID hit, True Value decided that they were going to do curbside, or they were going to do delivery, and they apparently didn't tell their dealer stores. So yeah, when you get delivery from True Value, it comes at a price. And it's not a good price. But thanks for the tip, though. All right, so this one we're going to use a little bit different hook. We are going to use a TMC 200R, which is a bent shanked hopper hook. I'll show you what it looks like here. And when I buy hooks, I don't buy them by the package. I buy hooks by the pound because I buy, like this hook in particular, I think my last order was 14,000 hooks because I use them in my fly tying kits. And they don't want to put all those in little baggies, so they just weigh them. And you get one big Ziploc bag full of hooks, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's the profile of it. It's a bent shanked hopper hook. I've tried this on a straight shanked hook because these are a little more expensive. Hookup ratio went way down. So I've stuck with this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our eyes on. And again, I would normally use 140 for this, but we're we're winging it here. So I'm going to use this Unifloss stuff. I clip that off. And then I come in and I'm going to go ahead and clip off my bead chain. Now, if you ever want to cut bead chain and you don't have a pair of pliers handy, put them way down in the throat of your scissors and you can cut them fine, never ruin the tip of your scissors. I know a lot of you kind of cringe when I do that. I've done it for years. It never ruins the scissors. You just have to put them way down in the throat because you never cut anything with the throat of your scissors. And I don't recommend you do that with your wife's scissors if or your spouse's scissors. Whoops. So we're going to do the same thing after I'm done shooting the eyes across the room. Same thing here. This time, because they're not lead eyes, we're not going to go 15 times. We're only going to go 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Twist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to frap them 1, 2, 3, and pull. And 1. Whoops, sorry. 1. Ugh, this thread is too big for this. 2.
Why are you using the,
3.
that kind of thread?
Because I didn't have the right kind.
Oh.
I sell fly tying kits, and I brought some with me. And because I sell fly tying kits, I deal everything in bulk. And sometimes I just kind of like forget to order stuff. And it kind of comes back to bite me when I have to come do things like this because I literally have not one single spool of UTC 140 thread. And I should probably have 200 of them in stock. So guess what Wapsy's getting tomorrow is a big order. Okay, so we're back and we're going to start tying this thing together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of this rabbit strip, just like this. It's just a regular Zonker strip, just a real long one. And we're going to cut off a little piece of this. And there's always this magic measurement in fly tying that's a number 2 pencil. So this is half of a number 2 pencil. I always love it when they talk about that with deer hair. Just cut off a number 2 pencil. And we're just going to tie this in crudely. It doesn't matter because no one's going to see it. So we have a little tail.
Which was it? That was marabou?
No, rabbit.
Rabbit. Okay.
Rabbit. So we have a little tail. Then we're going to take our mohair yarn. And in the beginning, when I first tied this fly, I would dub everything. From here on out, I would just dub it. And then I discovered mohair yarn. And that was a game changer because this is way faster than dubbing. And mohair yarn is real mohair, so it absorbs water. So it's perfect for this. We're going to tie in a strand of mohair yarn all the way to the back. and then we're going to come just in front of the eyes. And we're going to wrap this. And here's another great fly tying measurement. We want a cigar-shaped body. So for those of you that don't smoke cigars, you're in trouble. You'll never figure this out. But what we're going to do is we're going to form a little cigar-shaped body, which basically means it's fat in the middle and skinny on the ends. And you can see how much, oh, I made a mistake. I see I got all out of sequence here. We're going to go in the Wayback Machine. When my kids were little, we had this thing called the Wayback Machine. And when my kids would do something extremely stupid, they could ask the parent in charge to go to the Wayback Machine. And what the Wayback Machine did was it took you back 10 seconds with no penalty. And the parent didn't have to grant it, but if they did, the kid was usually pretty happy about it because they would get away with something. We're going to take a piece of 4-strand floss, as we have gone in the Wayback Machine, and we are going to tie that in on top of the little tail that we did. Sorry, I know this is hard to follow now that I'm out of sequence here. So we tie the tail in, then we tie in the floss, hopefully better than I just did. There we go. Then we bring our thread up to the front. We leave this hang. And now we're going to go back and form our body. And everybody always, when they do this fly, they always cheap out on the rib. And they never wrap it hard enough or whatever. Once the rib falls off this fly, take it off your line because it isn't going to catch any more fish. And I truly mean that. The rib is an integral part of this fly because of the way it looks. And I don't know what about it does that, but I can tell you that I've fished these things without ribs, and I've fished them hard and not caught any fish when I was having a great day with them. So
What's the stuff you're using now?
this is mohair yarn,
Okay.
just regular old mohair yarn. And there's a place on the internet called the Yarn Girls, and they have great mohair yarn, and it's real cheap. So now I'm going to go, and I'm just going to cross over the eyes a little bit just to give it a little bit of coverage. And I'm going to go up to the front here and just tie off. I've got so much stuff stuck to my bobbin, it's unbelievable. Okay, so now we're done with the yarn. We're going to clip that. We're going to leave it a little bit long when we clip it. We're not going to clip it real close. Mohair yarn is really weird. When you pull on it, it has a tendency to stretch. And if you cut it real close, eventually it kind of creeps back in and it'll come loose. So I always leave a little bit extra. Okay, now for the rib, we're going to take our floss and we are just going to barber pull it up the body. And we are going to pull it hard. If you can see, it's kind of shrinking into the body. That's what I want. We're going to get up to the front. We're going to tie it off. A few wraps. We're going to cut it off. Some crummy wraps. Yeah, this thread is not optimal. Sorry, guys. But it's what I had, so let me deal with it. There we go. Okay, so we got that fixed. Clip this off. Now we're going to turn the fly upside down. Put a few paranoid wraps on it. Then we're going to go back to our rabbit. And we're going to take an equal amount that we use for the tail, that Mystic 1/2 number 2 pencil measurement. We're going to cut that off.
Where did you say you got your mohair yarn?
It's a place called Yarn Girls. It's on the internet, and they will do specials all the time. Just be prepared. They will bombard you with emails, but you can just delete most of them. But they have the best prices on yarn that I've ever found. Maybe there's something better out there, but they have really good customer service. Okay, I'm going to hold this right where we're tying off here. Pinch method. See if I can trap most of it down. And again, if it torques, I'm not worried about it. If I didn't catch it all, I can pull it out. I can come back again. There we go. Nail it down. And then we have a little wing or beard, however you want to look at it. We're going to pull everything back. And this head is going to be ugly, ugly. But again, it's just a thread thing. If I had the right thread, I think I'd be a whole lot better off here. And we're going to put a whip finish on it. And am I seeing? Okay, so we're just going to put a quick whip finish on it. The head's way too big on this one. I apologize for that if you've seen them before. I've got one here that I can show you. Just trying to tie with this floss is not happening. And pull that one out. And here is what it should look like. I have one right here. This one was tied with the proper thread, so I'll put this one in, so you can see that it doesn't look like a Frankenstein head on it.
Do you tie that in other colors?
The two colors that I've tied this on, and this one has legs on it. You can either put legs on it or not put legs on it. The two colors that I've had the best luck with have been this one and the all white one. And I would have never, ever tied an all white one. And a kid that I had working for me, you'll see some pictures of him on my slideshow, Harrison Nash. I don't know if you guys, any of you guys ever met Harrison, but Harrison was an amazingly good fly tyer and amazingly good guide. And he kind of went off the rails a little bit, had some problems. But he tied them in all white and they killed it. And by the way, Harrison has the distinction of being the youngest licensed fishing guide in the state of Texas. He had a guide license at 15. You don't need a fishing license until you're 17. And he worked with me. Did you guys ever fish with Harrison? Yeah. He worked with me all through those early years up until he was about in his 20s. And we had to go to the Commissioner's Court of Parks and Wildlife and convince them that he was worthy of having a guide license, and they issued him a license at 15. And I was really proud of that because we worked really hard together for a lot of years. And he's kind of cleaning himself up a little bit and maybe come back. I don't know.
What color rib did you use on the white?
On the white, it was all white.
All white.
All white. The whole thing was white. And I thought, man, that's never going to work. And it worked like a champ. So some guys tie them, they call them inside out swamp monsters, and they'll tie all the black areas in chartreuse and all the chartreuse areas in black. So it's just like a reverse of it. So have I got time to do one more?
No, I think we should probably call it here. That's
Okay.
been excellent, Kevin.
Anyway.
Any questions either in the room or online?
Somebody asked in the chat what size hook that one was.
In place of the floss?
I have used wire in place of the floss, and it gives it a little bit more sink rate. So if you're concerned about sink rate, the good thing is that you can get a lot of different gauges of wire in chartreuse now. So yeah, that's a good question, and it adds a lot of durability. If you're going to be fishing these for a lot of sunfish, they will tear them up, whereas the bass won't tear them up as much. So yeah, that's a good substitution. Thanks for mentioning that, because I do that sometimes. Yeah.
What size hook is that?
That was a 4, so that was a size down from the bass candy, and I'll tie those as small as a 6, and they will just destroy the sunfish. Like right now on the San Marcos, you practically got to tie this thing on behind a tree because they'll jump up in a boat and grab it. I mean, it's nutty. So
Okay,
definitely
Kevin, that was
good.
great.
All right.
So we're going to take an hour break. Online audience, we're going to take an hour break. We'll be back at 7 o'clock, get a snack, and thank you so much.